So talking about the new Eldritch Battery in Mind Over Matter. Um, okay, so what the new Eldritch Battery does is it takes your energy shield, which is a pretty normal mechanic, and instead of converting it into mana, which then adds to your pool, the proposed changes are that it will take your energy shield and basically put it on top of your mana. So you'll spend energy shield when you cast, and the proposed changes are also that Mind Over Matter would then also take from that energy shield when you take damage to your mana. One of the most important things is also people have been talking about how Arctic Armor will be a mana drain, and because of that it'll work much the same way that Blood Rage would work with Energy Shield, whereas once you've turned it on, once you lose that Energy Shield it will not recover unless you have a secondary way to recover Energy Shield. So we're going to get into talking about the current Eldritch Battery in terms of its strengths and why it's been targeted for a nerf. At the moment, Eldritch Battery has a very low point investment for power for casters. At the moment, if you are interested in using a spell, you'll often find that once you've linked it past a certain point, the cost efficiency drops because you won't be able to cast the spell that you want. You know, the damage will be extremely high, but the casting will be suboptimal. Your clear speed will definitely suffer in terms of running out of mana quite often. Now, most people don't have a problem with that because of Eldritch Battery in its current form. They have generally not that much energy shield, just whatever they have on gear and not through points in the tree. And they're able to turn that into mana and then basically forget about it forever.
Yeah, essentially turning like a useless stat into a useful stat. You know, you have like 300 ES, it's not really going to do anything for you. Like you could call that extra hit points, but like when if you
Yeah,
keep getting hit for like 10 damage every 5 seconds, it'll never be there.
yeah, a lot of the time that energy shield is mostly useless. It's a one-time thing. It's not very much, and they haven't sunk any points into it all. And by taking a note that generally if you're passing from the Scion to anywhere on the top of the tree, or if you're going Witch to Shadow in any sort of way, whether you're doing that from the Templar or not, any way, it's only about like 3 to 2 points of investment. It's really fast on the tree to get to, and it suddenly turns something that's a one-time use defense into permanent defense through other combinations. So you have a higher pool for casting, you have a higher pool for Mind Over Matter, and for reserving clarity, which is huge because that mana regen can then allow you to use Arctic Armor, which is a very strong defense when used properly. Obviously not on its own, but combined with other things, as people have talked about. So the new Eldritch Battery will work in a completely different way from that. The new Eldritch Battery, as far as we know, will not convert your energy shield to mana, but just move it over essentially. Your energy shield now will be exhausted before your mana, and if you have Mind Over Matter, which we'll talk about later, it will damage the energy shield as well. So it will essentially serve as another form of defense. Now, one of the main things is that the new Eldritch Battery will work a lot like Energy Shield does in terms of every single mechanic of Energy Shield will be maintained. If you take direct damage to your mana, your Energy Shield won't recharge until you get through the recharge rate. Um, if you cast, your Energy Shield will not recharge until you haven't been casting for a while. Until you normally, like if you were blood magicked, your Energy Shield wouldn't recharge until you've stopped using skills. The mana regen, as far as we know, will remain the same. You won't get a boost to your mana regen by having Eldritch Battery, and that scares a lot of people. Whether or not that's warranted or not, there's a lot of people that are worried about not being able to continuously chain skills, movement skills especially, and that is something that we'll address as we continue on. Now, one of the main things that should be interesting with it is that if this does go through, you'll be able to reserve all of your mana, or at least, 99% of it based on your point allocation is. And your ES will become a temporary mana source as long as you're not, chaining skills all the time.
Which chaining skills would be in reference to things like whirling bladesing for no reason to move faster, as well as using lightning warp
just
to
like
move
general
faster,
utility skills.
or leap slamming, or
Yeah,
Or
this
where you have
heavy
such high clear
utility
speed
skills.
that you're always like casting an attack or something.
this will very much hurt builds that are based around not moving with Arctic armor and instead lightning warping around, which is kind of a funny mechanic to begin with. Those guys will really struggle with this. People are going to have to reassess their builds for that. So what is this directed at? Why are they doing this change? The main reason they're doing this is because of what we were talking about before. Eldritch Battery was just 2-point efficient, and it managed to completely remove people's mana problems for the entirety of the game for 2 to 3 points a lot of the time. And
I mean, you had to get like a roll on gear for mana regen, and then run clarity with your 10 billion mana, but that was about it.
Yeah, it's
really. It was kind of trivial to get to like 150 plus mana regeneration. Like if you didn't take Eldritch Battery, like currently, getting like above 150 mana regeneration is like insanely difficult. You have to roll like regen on everything.
And you actually
then,
have to invest points.
And it's like your entire mana pool.
You definitely have to invest points in the tree.
Something known that is pure cancer, which is running mana leech.
Oh god.
Well, I mean, you can run mana leech with Arctic armor. That's like not sustainable.
Yep.
Like when you move, you just like drain out your entire pool.
No, they've said that they
with like a high mana build in general, such things as like freeze pulse and other things like that have been coming back into favor a little bit. You can't use those without having a way to maintain the mana because the mana drains are insane.
Yeah.
They're fairly expensive, and you would basically now, if you were to use this, if you were interested in just running off mana, instead of running with the new Eldritch Battery, you would have to actually invest points into mana regeneration or maximum mana, which is something that basically no one was doing, or if they were, it was very nominal. Now, they've said that they're interested in rebalancing mana regen and the cost of skills. Generally, I think Arctic Armor they were touching on specifically, they'd like to rebalance because of the way that it exists right now, as basically only available to people that are running Eldritch Battery. And I think that there's arguments for and against that, but that's pretty much how it works. Because no one is going to go through the trouble of investing into tons of mana without grabbing Eldritch Battery as well. It's just too available. And the Eldritch Battery Mind Over Matter Arctic Armor combo is massively low investment for points and insanely good. I mean, it's obviously not the best, but it turns a caster that gets one shot into a caster that doesn't get one shot. And generally that's all you need is to just not die instantly so that you can back off and continue casting. Sort of like the strength of range build to begin with. It's part of the reason why acrobatics is so strong. Is because generally if you get hit once, you're not going to get hit again and you can walk away. So obviously the builds that are going to be most affected are those ones that are pathing over to Mind Over Matter, or pathing to Eldritch Battery, sorry, and then taking Mind Over Matter through Cloak of Defiance. Definitely the interaction of Cloak of Defiance is going to change drastically afterwards. It's going to be really interesting to see.
It's also kind of like a silly interaction, because you have Energy Shield, which is a buffer for your life pool, which you're converting to mana, which you're then using as a buffer for your life pool.
Exactly.
So you're converting like Energy Shield, which doesn't
effective
recharge
health
because you're constantly taking damage just by tiny chip amounts, to a pool that constantly recharges and actually reinforces your regular pools.
Yeah.
So you get the benefit of Energy Shield with not like none of the downsides of Energy Shield for like 2 points and then like an item.
Yeah, basically, at the moment, Eldritch Battery converting your Energy Shield to your life pool, well, through mana, is much more point efficient because you're already getting that mana regen that you need for your skills, and all of a sudden the Energy Shield, which is like a one-time, instantly gone, and then you have to wait forever for it and be out of combat for it to come back, is now something that constantly regenerates in combat without having to donate any points into Energy Shield recharge rate. And people are going to be really upset about that for a while because they didn't really think it was overpowered, but the design team and the balance team have actually decided that it is. And I think the discussions that have come out of this have really made their point that it really is way too strong. People aren't making the most optimal builds, they're just making the most point efficient ones. There's no real difference between most of these caster builds except which spell you've managed to slot and whether or not you took area nodes or like spell damage or spell crit nodes.
Or projectile nodes.
Or projectile nodes, exactly. So the new Mind Over Matter, which we were just touching on, is going to be really weird because like Ghudda was saying, and like we said before, it's taking Energy Shield, which protected your health, and moving it to mana, which through Mind Over Matter then protects your health. It's really confusing. It makes no sense, really. I mean, it would be much better if it took just from your mana, and the extra energy shield that you had was like a base battery amount that you could then spend and be able to, you know, move in and out of the fight with a little bit. It really doesn't make much sense to me because I think that if you're using your mana as mana, you would get mana regen, and that would be useful for Mind Over Matter. Or if, let's say you're a physical build, you would have Mana Leech, or if you wanted to slot Mana Leech as a gem, then you get this defense. But if you have no point investment into it, like we were talking about before, if you don't invest any points into it, you're just going to lose that mana forever. You'll get hit once, all your mana is gone, and you only have your EB reserved to cast off of. That would basically be like, to me, the ideal way that Mind Over Matter would work, because it would be useful for people that invest in any sort of mana, and not useful for people that just take it because it's a node they can take nearby. It's also very confusing for players as well, because it just doesn't seem to make sense. There's a lot of like, how is this going to work? I don't understand this. It's not very clear. And also, Mind Over Matter, if it does take from the energy shield, will require you to invest in both ES and mana regen, or some combination of like just ES regen or whatever else. It's going to make it really strange and not really useful, because if you're investing points into energy shield regen to protect your health, you might as well do that while it's still on your health and not while it's on your mana bar. It really doesn't make very much sense at all.
Some things that we do not know, though, is there's going to be new items with mana gained on hit, as well as jewels. We've seen the prefix and or the suffix for energy shield on hit, as well as the new things that have not been shown to us. So, although these changes seem like they might interact in odd ways with the current stuff that we have available, there may be new ways that make more sense and make it function in a more predictable, easy to use manner, and it might become more diverse build oriented instead of minimalizing builds.
Yes. And I think it's really interesting because there's this whole wave of stuff that's coming that we have no idea how it's going to work. I think that people saying that, you know, oh, well, you know, we have this little bit of here and there. You know, at the moment, we have no indication that any of the new stuff that's coming out is going to make this more favorable. And it's interesting because we don't know that the discussion has become so heated. We have absolutely no idea. So let's get into the salt, because there's a ton of salt, and this is pretty much the most entertaining part about this. Eldritch Battery as the way it is now is OP. And if you don't think it's OP, you're wrong. Because it's opening up way too many caster builds to do way too much damage. It's indirectly making melee and other builds worse. Obviously, we can go into Tornado Shot some other time because that's a completely different set. Bow builds are also kind of OP with acrobatics. Everybody's talking about how it's going to push them into using acrobatics, phase acrobatics in their caster builds instead, because they don't have this other defense that requires little point investment. And what do you think, Ghudda? What's your opinion on this?
I don't know, man.
Do you think that
It's just like, there's really no downside to taking Eldritch Battery if you're near it. Like, that's just the primary problem with it.
Do you think if Eldritch Battery was reduced in effectiveness, it would be any better?
Or is it just like negative mana regeneration?
Or just
Doesn't
50 or like 50% conversion or something like that?
mean, it's still very point efficient, and like it still gives you a massive amount of mana with very little downside, if any, because you're not using your energy shield to begin with. Like you go hybrid pool, but you need like a humongous amount of like hybrid pool to make that kind of like a good idea. And like
Yeah,
when your ES goes down from like taking chip damage all the time, then it's the same thing that it would be now. You just wait out of combat until it finally gets back up, or like if the new change went through, it's like, oh, I ran out of mana. Well, now I have to stand out of combat until it finally gets back up.
yeah. Whatever binary investment that you have, going into ES regen or ES leech or anything like that, you might as well have had that on your health the whole time if you're going to be mind over matter. I think a lot of this is talking about mind over matter as well, because Eldritch Battery, if you're just using it for, the new Eldritch Battery won't be much different from your old Eldritch Battery for like 90% of cases. If you're not using mind over matter, it's actually not going to affect you very much, as far as I'm concerned. Because unless you're constantly spamming skills and really overworking your mana pool, you know, there's not much difference to be had. It's when you take large hits, it's when you're using it as a defense that it makes almost no sense to take anymore, because that defense that you're using points to regenerate, the energy shield, it was already on your life. There's almost no reason to move it to your mana pool to protect your life again. At least that's my opinion on it. I think that also casters are used to being able to just spam infinitely. It'll introduce paced
yeah.
playing.
Just stack all the cast speed, all the attack speed, all the highest
Just
cost
let it go.
supports.
Yeah, people
Yeah,
are just
I mean,
used to these spammy move speed builds.
when Ghudda was messing around with the maximum cast speed build, he just was like, "Oh, I'll just take Eldritch Battery. Oh, look, I can now spam infinitely for like, I don't know, what, 10, 12 seconds at a time with that dual Apex max cast speed, like ridiculous overstacked cast speed."
Yeah, but even that wasn't enough for like that much cast speed.
Yeah, typically you
But
didn't even
that's
need
kind
that
of like
much
an
because
edge
you were
case, though.
you were clearing stuff real fast too.
That's kind of like an edge case, though. I mean, like for wanders, like a long time ago, you didn't want to use an imbued wand for a wander because a tornado wand or a prophecy wand had a higher crit chance, higher damage, but lower attack speed. So like power siphon, which is like an insanely expensive skill, and then like all the super expensive supports like GMP used to be a 2x cost, and then chain used to be like a 2x cost, I think. Like those supports, they're like it's untenable even with Eldritch Battery. Like back in the day, like you just couldn't reasonably get enough mana to cast everything at like high attack rates.
Yeah, there's a reason why
So
people switch from rolling demon daggers to ambushers.
yeah,
The difference in attack speed was like way more point efficient in terms of like leech, attack speed, damage, total damage, and people have moved away from that like slower, harder hitting stuff into the faster attacking, more crit chance kind of stuff. It's really interesting to see the natural progression of people using Eldritch Battery more and more and more. It really brings in the design development ideal for these keystones, as far as I know, has always been a massive power with a drawback. Like if you go all the way across the board, pretty much every single one of them has a drawback included in it. I mean, obviously, aside from like Onder's Guile, which is just a benefit with no detraction.
I'm not sure why that's the case actually.
I
I feel
mean,
like
they mostly are though. I mean, if you go across the board, like Unwavering Stance has a drawback, Blood Magic has a drawback. Avatar of Fire, we go around the board. Like, I guess Acrobatics, technically now it has a drawback because it reduces the block chains and stuff like that as well.
yeah, but I think like phase acrobatics should have like a minor drawback, and then like Ondar's Guile especially should have like a tiny drawback.
Yeah, Under's
There's like
Guile
something
is much too strong for what it does.
yeah, like Ondar's I don't even know how like Ondar's Guile was designed. It makes no sense. It's like take
It
it.
hasn't
It's
even
like
been
a
touched. It's
projectile.
just like, here, just have extra defense for free.
Yeah.
You got to this part of the tree, congratulations.
Yep.
But essentially what this would do was it would change EB from being like a binary playstyle where you just get more mana and everything's more useful into something where you would actually have to have a drawback. You would have to stop casting occasionally. You might have to build for it instead of just taking the point and being like, lol, now I have points to cast with.
But also there's like a lot of different options. I mean, like I think one of the really interesting things is you could have like you could take Eldritch Battery, and then you could reserve your entire mana pool, and then you could get like say 1,000 ES off gear or something. It's like you have 1,000 free mana. That's a lot of mana to just do something with. And then you could take Ghost Reaver and then like an Aziri belt, like a 1% Fire Leech belt, and use Incinerate. So instead you have a 1% Mana Leech,
Yep.
effectively, with Incinerate. And like I don't know if that's enough, but like it's something you could do with like the new node.
Yeah, there's all sorts of different stuff. I mean, there's like, for instance, using life gain on hit and mana leech with Ghost Reaver in order to both, for attack builds, gain life and mana. There's a lot of different stuff with that. Like,
the new claw that has the life and mana gain on hit as well.
yep. But that's much better just for typical builds, because like, why would you take Eldritch Battery when you can just leech your energy shield, leech your life, and leech your mana? There's no reason to move that defense over and then like try to take Mind Over Matter to get it back again. People are worried about the changes hurting basically like the viability of casters in general, but that's really stupid, and I think people should stop saying that, because people are really entitled in terms of how strong casters are. If every build takes Eldritch Battery in order to work properly, the game needs to be redesigned. It's not that, you know, removing Eldritch Battery is going to kill you. It's that the game is in the wrong place if everybody takes the same node all the time.
Yep. It also converts like a really interesting mechanic. Like there are like the regular pools. Like there's life, mana, and ES, and then there's like the defense, which is just armor, evasion, and energy shield. And like instead of Eldritch Battery, just like converting, say, something you don't need to something you do. It's just kind of like how Iron Reflexes was back in the day. It's like, well, evasion is crap, so let's just make that armor instead. It's like, oh, you're in the area, just grab Iron Reflexes. Like it's the same thing.
I personally, recently I've been playing a claw build, which I'm going to be posting eventually, but recently the Mind Over Matter changes have been really making me think about this kind of stuff, because at the moment the proposed changes, having it remove the energy shield as well as mana, are, as far as I'm concerned, really bad for the future of Mind Over Matter, because it's not going to do very much for most people. Right now, Mind Over Matter is the #1 choice if you're an EB build, because typically it can only be a benefit to you. You drop like one aura and you get way more effective health. And what's going to happen is, if Mind Over Matter gets changed to the way that it's been proposed, is almost no one will want to use it. There's going to be a small percentage of people that are actually interested in it. I think the main use of it would be if you've reserved all of your mana, or most of your mana, that it will only take a certain amount of energy shield out, and that you'll still be able to cast even if you get hit really hard. But I think that it really gets in the way of meaningful build choices and meaningful point usage. Because for people that are interested in having that energy shield as a reserve to cast from regardless of what happens to your mana, that gets thrown completely out the window with Mind Over Matter. It would be much better, in my opinion, if Mind Over Matter took directly from mana and didn't touch energy shield at all, because otherwise that energy shield might have just been on your life to begin with.
Yeah, I think like if you take damage, or if with the new Mind Over or Eldritch Battery, like if you spent mana, it would go from your mana pool first down to like 1 mana, so you could still like have like Arctic Armor activated, and then like it would transition when you ran out of mana into the ES pool.
Yep.
Well, that's something that they're still.
Yeah, they're still on the fence
100%
about, which is why.
Yeah. I mean, they're not trying to quote kill any mechanics. Even in Rory's post, at the end they said edit, like the main mana drain amount or mechanic on Arctic Armor. So even Arctic Armor's mechanic itself may be adjusted accordingly. So it'll be very interesting to see what they do with that, as
Good.
well as the reason why a lot of people started going Mind Over Matter in the first place is because you used to have block. Everybody used to have enough block or spell block that you just flat didn't take the damage. Well, you realized that that was becoming too dominant in the meta, and people were able to get away with like crazy things because they just weren't taking hits. And then they're like, well, that needs to be changed. So they changed that. And then what happened is you have, well, we're going to take the hit. So how can we make it not kill us? Which mind over matter really shone through at that point, because it was like, oh, well, if I'm going to take a hit, might as well have like 1,000 extra mana I don't use and 5,000 life. And now it doesn't really matter. I can take a, 6,000 hit, 5,000 hit and not die.
Yep.
So because of the block change, it kind of led to, well, if I'm going to get hit anyway, might as well have maximum pool. And then the combination of the ES mana pool with Mind Over Matter is just like incredibly too strong for the current. So with the new meta coming, it'll be very interesting to see how it all gets adjusted and the balance changes. And this brings to the whole point of why there's a beta in the first place, and that's a good thing that there's a beta, but the delivery of the information was poor in my opinion.
Yeah, Rory and the rest of GGG have said that they're definitely handling this with kid gloves. They're interested in seeing how people react to the changes, having a discussion openly with the community about it, and interested in seeing how it develops, for sure. And I think that's very cool. I think it's great that they're actually listening to the community, because we are interested in making sure that it's balanced and also useful, I suppose, because these are just concepts that they've created in order to balance the game for us.
Yep. It's also amusing that one of the lines in his thing is one of the most popular keystones. Any sweeping change won't be made without testing the waters carefully. So it'll definitely be important that they'll run several tests.
Several tests will be run. Yes.
Yes.
I think that's pretty much it for the discussion, isn't it? I mean, it'll obviously continue in the Reddit comments. The salt will continue to flow from the salt mines.
Well, it's like, what does it change? Like, what does it enable?
Hmm.
Like,
Yeah, it doesn't really seem to enable anything. It seems to be an overall
Yeah.
nerf as far as it's concerned.
well, like,
And
it doesn't really change anything. It's just Mind Over Matter might be slightly less effective with the straight mana pool.
Yep.
Or like, if you only stacked just like straight mana. Because doesn't the Cloak of Defiance has like 100 mana on it, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well,
104.
one of the strange things too is like if you're Mind Over Matter, you have to actually take life damage for it to pull from your mana pool.
Yeah.
So that's going to be kind of weird in multiple ways. Because like if you have a nominal amount of energy shield, you'll take it before you take life damage. Or you could move to your ES, and then when you take life damage, it goes away as well. So at the moment, it's just like the mechanic doesn't make sense to me. I'm still working my head around it, why they would think that, you know, and I really want to try to, like, if possible, if everyone agrees with me, to sort of push the discussion over towards not having that mechanic. Because I think it's more meaningful for it not to take from energy shield if you've moved it over to your mana.
Oh, one really minor thing about it going to mana is on the first hit of Energy Shield, you do have a stun avoidance, which that'll also not apply, obviously. Not that that is a
Yes, they did.
significant
Yep.
thing, but there are some builds that
But
take
that's
an
how,
extra note,
but
a
that's how
note or
EV has
two.
always worked.
Yeah, EV has always worked that way, so that mechanic won't
Correct,
change.
but I'm
Yeah,
just
but yeah, having the energy shield on just because
on
it's
your
on your
life.
mana.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but by
right.
keeping it on your life and using it as actual energy shield, you do get an initial hit of extra stun avoidance, as well as there being nodes in the tree explicitly for stun avoidance with energy shield. So they understand that it being on your life pool, you should have some kind of draw to that. Like the hybrid idea should have an appeal of some kind that's not a low life hybrid idea. Like there needs to be like that build idea of hybrid just doesn't seem to be very viable at all at the moment. So it's like there's a whole group of builds that have to be that could potentially be available there that just aren't. And it's interesting that what the new meta is going to bring with all of this and the overall changes And I'm sure that as much as people are crying right now or salting or whatever, when somebody finds out a way to really take advantage of the situation and optimize a build or gear, it may not look like the builds we're doing now, just like the builds we're doing now don't look anything like the builds right at the open beta. I mean, they're completely different.
Right.
People are going
My
back and
personal
revisiting ideas,
my
but
personal prediction of this is we've been rolling around the idea since it was announced that, for instance, Vault's Protector make it an indirect buff from this,
yeah, yeah,
and
Ball's protecting. Yeah.
I feel like Eldritch Battery, which interestingly enough follows thematically as far as I'm concerned, and that's pretty cool. That Eldritch Battery will essentially support burst playstyle, where people will be using high cost skills such as Discharge, and then letting it regenerate between packs. Now that's kind of cool to
Or
me that it will actually sort of like some people will go towards like the sustained mana pool playstyle, and it'll push other people towards burst playstyle, and that will open up build diversity because a
as
lot of
well as
people will find it hard to like maintain the mana cost of discharge. That's why Ghudda had his blood magic discharger, is because the mana cost is prohibitive. But if he can reserve heralds and run haste or anything else like that and invest some points into ES regeneration rate and be able to cast and only have like a second or two downtime between casts, like that's pretty cool. That's a new approach to builds. It buffs stuff, it makes things different, and it doesn't force too much power towards one side or the other.
not only that, but if you look at not necessarily the diversity, but the playstyle diversity, right now, playstyle is all about the maximum clear speed total, not necessarily from pack to pack, but like that's might be the only difference. The total end goal of the clear speed may be the same, but the way you go about it, almost everybody is about like you don't have very many people that just go and one shot a pack. Everything is about DPS, not necessarily damage. And the
If
big
you compare it,
variances in
it's
that
like
are like the
Well, it's
very
total clear speed. Like
yeah,
Proliv has very low DPS but very high clear speed.
correct.
right.
You have
There's
things like
basically
that.
like the run and gun play style, like arc and other shotgun skills like that, or well, not shotgun skills, but other spam skills like that. And then there's like the large hit like flame blast style skills, and basically people are it's very binary right now.
Yeah,
I
there's not a whole
yeah.
bunch of variance in between the two.
I think generally this will bring the level of spellcasters down a little bit overall, which are probably artificially too high. I mean, we can also, some other time we can talk about tornado shot and bow builds in general, because they're also probably in a very good place right now, maybe need to be touched as well. But it will bring them down, which will allow them to balance a little bit better. And maybe they've already done this. They said they're going to be changing the scaling a lot. Um, it's going to make melee better indirectly,
Yeah,
which is
yeah.
just good for the game in general because right now melee is hurting a lot. It may this may be too sweeping. Melee may become flavor of the month really fast with the netcode changes. Melee may be getting a massive buff. I mean, it already is, but we just don't know yet because I feel like with a lot of the changes that they're going to roll through at the same time, there's going to be a pretty big shift in the meta.